everyone, my name is Catherine and welcome to my channel. And today I wanted to do a comparison video about two different trips that are designed for group travel for young adults between the ages of like 19 to 35 depending on the trip. And those two are EF Ultimate Break, or formerly known as EF College Break when I went with them, and Contiki. I thought it would be a good idea to compare these two trips because I know when I was wanting to travel on some kind of group travel for young adults, these were the two options that came out first that were kind of highest on my radar that I was trying to compare. And honestly, there aren't that. I tried looking last night to see what people were saying, but there's a lot of reviews on EF College Break, there's a lot of reviews on Contiki, but there's not that many that actually compares the two. So I thought I would do that because I've actually been on both. So first I wanted to say when I went, with who, and where I went. So my first time actually going on one of these trips was with EF Ultimate Break. I wrote some notes down, by the way, so that's why I'm looking down at my phone. So my first trip was, like I said, with EF Ultimate, and I did what was called a European road trip. I wanted to do kind of the generic European trip that kind of goes along most of Western Europe. This was my first trip without parents, without any guardians. I believe I was about 21 years old, my first international trip alone or on a tour like this. It started in Amsterdam and it kind of did like a U and then went up and ended in London. And I think it went down all the way to Austria. Today we are in Austria. That's the background.
We're in Austria.
Yeah, it's so pretty. And then we went back up, went to Paris, and then we ended in London. So we hit a lot of the main European cities. So that was my first trip with EF, and that was in late summer of 2015. My second trip with EF was a Scotland, England, Ireland meshed trip together, and we also went to Northern Ireland, and that was in summer of 2017. And I will say I've been on more trips with Contiki. So I've been on a Russia and Scandinavia trip with Contiki, and that was in 2017 as well, later in the summer after the EF trip. And then I also, when I did a working holiday visa in Australia, my big trip during that time, because I was working in Melbourne, but my big trip was going up the coast of Eastern Australia that started in Sydney and went all the way up north to Cairns. I can never say that right. That was with Contiki as well. And then my most recent international trip before the pandemic hit was two back-to-back Contiki trips, one in Egypt and one that was a combination that went to both Jordan and Israel. So I wanted to give some background info on both, some comparisons, and some differences as well. They're both pretty similar trips with the same exact idea. They're both fast-paced. You're both staying in kind of hostel-esque type, maybe slightly nicer accommodations with people in that trip as well. You both have a trip manager, a bus driver, and you have a tour guide in each city. They both include tickets to like the big places. You're both on a bus the whole time pretty much. They both give you a lot of time that's already pre-planned. Also, they give you time to do your own thing, and both give optional activities they can pay extra for, or just free time to do your own thing. They're both great to go as a solo traveler too if you want to make friends and all of that. But now going into specifics with them is, I would say, first off, EF is a US-based program and Contiki is international. So when you go on an EF trip, it is catered more towards Americans, and so when I've gone, I would say 90-something% of the trip, of the group itself that you're traveling with, is with other Americans. If you want to travel with other Americans, then EF would be a better choice for you. Contiki, you get a lot of different nationalities that are on these Contiki trips. I will say though, Contiki is notorious for having Australians on their trips, so you'll probably have like 60 or 70% Australians and then 20-30% somewhere from Europe, and then you have like 10 or 20% like Canadian American kind of. So if you want to travel with more international people, then Contiki is your way to go. Also, EF is catered towards people that are 18 years old to 29 years old, and Contiki is 18 to 35 years old. Also, I will say Contiki has more trips available. They go to more places, they have more trips, more options, and that is why I've gone to Contiki more times than EF. I will say EF has gotten better. So when I went in 2015, I want to say they only had like not even 20 different trips as an option, and they've added so many trips since 2015. I've noticed every few months when I check their website, I look and I'm always so surprised to see how many more trips they have. I wanted to compare side to side a popular and similar trip to EF and Contiki, and I'll put the screenshots here. And when I first looked, I thought that Contiki did not include round-trip flights from your hometown to where you're starting and then where you're ending back to your hometown. EF does include those prices, which does make a big difference, because I will say that those two flights internationally is probably the biggest expense of your trip, which will make a big difference whether they're included or not. But Contiki does give you the option to actually buy your trip including those flights or not including those flights. So when I looked at this Greek island hopping trip, I will say one is 13 days, one is 11 days, so there's a 2-day difference. They don't have the exact same trip, but just comparing similar trips, similar places, similar length of time. And I will say that Contiki was cheaper by $600 when you want to add your international flights than EF. So they're pretty similar in cost, because when you think about it, traveling, that is a good chunk of money, but it's not huge. But I will say I think Contiki is slightly cheaper than EF in the long run, but it's not by a huge difference. So I wouldn't say that that should be a huge thing to look out for. I will say one thing that is nice about EF versus Contiki is that EF typically has smaller groups, at least when I went. When I went on Contiki, there would be about 40 plus people on the tour, and when you're going long hauls on a bus, because you're on the same bus pretty much the entire time, like that is truly your home, because you're changing hostels or hotels or whatever every day or 2 or 3 max. And so the bus is truly a lot of times where people get their sleep and where they just have their downtime. There's a big difference when only 20 people are on a trip, and so everyone has their own like aisle, or like those, you know how buses are like 2x2 seats and then goes all the way back. And I remember on EF everyone would have their own kind of 2 seats per person, so they could like sprawl out and like stretch out their legs and relax. And that makes such a big difference when traveling on these trips. And then I remember going to Contiki and every single seat was filled, and so when you're crammed for like 10 hours or whatever, going from one major city to the next, it really does make a big difference. With Contiki, a lot of times they have like month-long trips or something like that that go to different regions, and sometimes people will go the first half and then leave, and other people will join the second half, and like people are coming and going a lot. And that was the case with my Russian Scandinavia trip. I think it was like a month-long trip, but I was only on that for maybe 2 weeks. This is probably a personal preference, but if you want to be on just a tour with the same people the whole time and really make those solid relationships, EF may be better, because Contiki, there's a chance that you will have make these friends, and then that leg of the tour goes away and then new people come. Not everyone, but like maybe a third of the people leave and a new third come, and it's kind of like more like ebbs and flows, I guess. You have the same tour guide, you have the same bus driver, but it's like the different people. Another thing I will say, and it depends on the person, and I feel like Contiki has this rep that is no secret, but I will say that you're traveling with young adults in this program, and Contiki is known to be a party trip, a drinking trip, going out, all of that stuff. People do that on EF as well, but it's definitely not as much. It's not something that I've had me steer clear from, because for me, I actually don't drink at all. I have no interest in it. It's just a personal preference. People can do what they want, but that's just not something that I want to do. I'm really go to these trips so that I can see the countries, do all the cultural things, see all the sights, and also I want to make some friends on these trips as well. I will say I prefer EF for that matter. And so when asking me what I prefer, which tour, Contiki or EF, honestly, I like having both options because I like Contiki, that you have like the international people that you meet from all over the world. That's really cool. Now I have a lot of friends from Australia, but Contiki also gives you more options. They have a lot of longer trips. They go to a lot more places. But I also really love EF because I feel like I like the smaller group size. I will say, I remember when I went, or when I was planning to go on to Egypt, Jordan, Israel, we kind of ruled out EF pretty quickly because I think they did have some trips in that region of the world, but they didn't have as many options, like I've said, and it was just harder to plan. And so we went on Contiki. I'm thinking I want to go to like maybe the Galapagos Islands and Ecuador, and I see myself gradually or naturally going towards EF more, maybe because I feel like I'd be, as a solo traveler, maybe more comfortable going with EF just because there's less people, so it's not as overwhelming because I'm an introvert and the party scene is not as prevalent. I'm definitely down to go on another Contiki trip again. I've made some good friends from Contiki trips. Over half of the people usually are solo travelers, so if you're worried about that, it's normal, it's healthy. I would be worried as well, I get it. But you have to know, it's important to know, is that more than half these people are solo travelers, so you're not alone. A lot of the times it is better to go solo because it forces you to actually meet other people instead of just staying with your friend or partner, whoever you're traveling with, because it's, you know, more comfortable. But yeah, that has been my review on both places. I hope it gave you some insights, some comparison as well. They're both very similar, but just have a few distinct features from each other that I mentioned. And if you have done either Contiki or EF or both, or are planning to, please let me know down below where you want to go, with who, when, or, you know, in the future, whether you want to go or if you did it in the past. Hopefully we can travel again soon safely, and I'm looking forward to when I can go on one of those trips again. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in a future video of mine. Bye.